The first thing you notice is the light, soft, endless, and strangely comforting, as if the star at the center of the ringworld were breathing gently across the horizon. There is no sunrise here, not in the way we understand it on Earth. Instead, the day simply glides across the sky, slipping from one shade of gold to another, illuminating the inner surface of a structure so massive that its curvature disappears into infinity. Imagine standing on a plane so wide it feels flat, but knowing intellectually that the ground beneath you is bending upward, arcing millions of miles around a star until it loops on itself. The atmosphere is quiet, dense, almost reverent. The breeze carries no scent of oceans or forests, though both exist here, but something cleaner, engineered, calibrated. And as your eyes adjust, you realize that what you thought was the sky is actually a colossal ceiling of engineered brilliance, transforming raw starlight into the calm glow that sustains this artificial world. In the distance, beyond the haze, you can see thin, shimmering lines stretching across the heavens, massive shadow panels suspended thousands of kilometers above the inner surface, rotating slowly to create the illusion of day and night. Their movements are musical, subtle, so precise that the inhabitants below rarely notice them. And yet, if you stand still long enough, you feel it, a faint tremor in the air, a small inconsistency, as if the world itself shifts imperceptibly beneath its own weight. Engineers call it a micro-oscillation, a harmless ripple in the magnetic fields that hold the ringworld stable. But here, in this moment of stillness, it feels like something more, like a breath being held. You look to the horizon again, expecting its curvature to comfort you, to remind you that this is all under control. But the horizon does not reassure. It is too vast, too perfect, too silent. The ringworld stretches so far that it almost challenges your sense of existence, turning distance into abstraction. And in that immensity, so peaceful, so meticulously designed, you sense a question hidden beneath the quiet. Why does a structure built to be flawless feel like it is waiting for something? Why do the engineers whisper about a region that must never be approached? This place, this infinite ribbon of worlds wrapped around a star, was supposed to be humanity's ultimate triumph, an escape from planetary fragility, a new beginning across a canvas without limits. But the silence that hangs along its edge suggests otherwise. Something in this perfect world is not perfect at all. Something that its architects tried to bury in the equations. Something they hoped no one would ever find. And as we begin this journey together, across an interior landscape larger than 1,000,000 Earths combined, we will eventually reach the truth they tried so hard to hide, the forbidden zone, where the flawless ringworld bends, breaks, or awakens. Long before the ringworld became a tranquil home for billions, before its plains curved into the horizon and its oceans shimmered under engineered sunlight, it existed only as a dream inside the minds of a civilization that refused to accept the limits of planets. The architects, as they are remembered now, were not a single generation or even a single culture. They were the culmination of thousands of years of ambition, cooperation, and relentless pursuit of expansion. Their earliest records describe a moment of collective awakening when their scientists realized that planetary surfaces, no matter how vast, would always be finite and fragile. Worlds could be shaken by tectonics, stripped by solar winds, or shattered by cosmic accidents. But a ring, an enormous band encircling a star, could offer land area beyond imagination, stretching wide enough to cradle entire new civilizations while standing far from the dangers that had threatened their origin world. Their first models were small, crude, little more than theoretical arcs plotted on starlit parchment. But as their technology evolved, the dream solidified. They built orbital labs that could sustain research for decades. They learned to manipulate gravity, to forge alloys that refused to bend or break, to harness the raw, electromagnetic breath of their star. And with each breakthrough, the dream grew clearer, more possible. The architects believed they were building not just a structure, but a promise that future generations would be freed from scarcity, conflict, and the unpredictability of nature. They imagined continents suspended in eternal calm, powered directly by the stars' energy. They envisioned ecosystems that could be shaped like brushstrokes, climates tuned with mathematical elegance, and cities rising along the inner curve in patterns inspired by planetary art and cosmic geometry. Yet even at the height of their optimism, there existed a tension in their writings, a quiet refrain repeated across different records: "There will be a region we cannot stabilize." At first, historians assumed this referred to normal engineering limitations, but as more fragments were uncovered, a different picture appeared. Early simulations predicted one zone along the ring that resisted harmonic balance. Its gravitational waves fluctuated unpredictably. Magnetic flows twisted unnaturally. No equation behaved as expected. It wasn't a design flaw. It was as though the star itself pressed against that region differently, creating an instability the architects could not explain. Instead of abandoning the project, however, they built around it, reinforcing the surrounding segments, rerouting energy lines, and sealing all references to the anomaly under layers of administrative restriction. The official narrative for centuries described the Ringworld as flawless, perfectly stable, a marvel without weakness. But the truth lingered quietly in the margins of ancient journals, a promise of perfection threatened by an unresolved question. As the structure neared completion, the architects stood in the void, watching as the final segments locked in place, forming a continuous arc millions of miles long. The light from the star stretched against the inner surface for the first time, bathing the engineered lands in a glow that felt like creation itself. In that moment, they believed they had succeeded, that they had built a world no catastrophe could undo. And yet, even as the celebration echoed across their civilization, a small team of engineers, those who had witnessed the computational abnormalities firsthand, stood apart from the joy. They exchanged glances, silent but knowing. The anomaly remained. The instability still defied explanation, and deep within their private archives, they left a final note for those who would inherit this monumental creation. There is one region that the Ringworld will never fully obey. Build with caution, approach with reverence, and if the day ever comes when the anomaly awakens, remember that we warned you. Life inside the Ringworld feels, at first glance, astonishingly ordinary. A quiet irony, considering that nothing about this place is truly natural. Yet the inhabitants who have grown up here walk across its limitless plains with the same casual familiarity that humans on Earth bring to their neighborhoods and parks. To them, the sky is simply the sky, though it is actually the inner surface of a megastructure stretching millions of miles overhead. They do not wake to sunrise. Instead, they wake to the gently shifting hue of engineered daylight, calibrated to mimic the mood of early morning. Shadows appear not because of a rotating planet, but because the giant shadow panels far above tilt with graceful precision, dimming the star's ceaseless glow into cycles of rest and rhythm. In some regions, the horizon appears strangely curved, subtly bending upward as it stretches away, but inhabitants hardly notice. It is simply the shape of their world. Vast forests arc toward a vanishing point that never arrives. Oceans sweep along the inner band of the ring, their waters curving in ways that would confound an earthborn traveler. Farmers guide floating irrigation systems built into the ring's surface, unaware that beneath their fields lie circuits older than recorded history. Children in cliffside towns play on platforms suspended hundreds of meters above the inner surface, each platform anchored to the ring through magnetic stabilizers that hum softly beneath their feet. Entire cities cling to the curvature of the band, with towers that seem to tilt inward, following the arc of the megastructure. Markets bustle with life, illuminated by skylights that are, in truth, thin sections of the ring's inner wall, where energy is converted directly into visible light. Traders speak of harvests and craftwork, never once considering the staggering engineering hidden beneath the soil. Even the oceans behave differently here. Their tides are not governed by a distant moon, but by subtle magnetic shifts built into the ring's inner surface. Ships glide across waters whose waves ripple in patterns designed centuries ago by the architects, patterns intended to dissipate energy evenly across the structure so that no region bears more stress than another. And yet, the Ringworld inhabitants share a cultural habit that outsiders might find peculiar. They avoid traveling too far in a single direction, not because of danger, but because the world is simply too vast, too endless, too repetitive. A person could walk for a lifetime and never reach the far curve of the ring. Many describe a strange unease, a sense that the farther you go from home, the more the landscape begins to feel uncanny, as though the world itself is looping. Geographers assure them that this is merely a psychological effect of extreme scale, but some whisper that it is something else. In certain regions, travelers report moments of déjà vu that last too long, or describe patches of land where the air feels thicker, quieter, as though the ring systems are holding their breath. Animals behave oddly in those zones, not fleeing but hesitating, sniffing the air before circling back. Farmers tell stories of days when the light above feels slightly off, as if the panels overhead hesitate in their rotation. Most people dismiss these stories as imagination, the product of living in a place too large to fully comprehend. But engineers take notice, scribbling notes and quietly comparing them to old records. Yet daily life continues, undisturbed and peaceful. People wake, work, play, love and dream beneath an artificial sky crafted with impossible precision. They build homes along the vast inner plains where artificial rivers flow in programmed harmony. They raise families in towns perched on the curvature of a world where down is always toward the star at the center. And through it all, they live blissfully unaware that somewhere out there, beyond their fields, beyond their cities, beyond their sense of normalcy, lies a place the architects never meant anyone to reach. A place where the Ringworld's perfect rhythm stutters. A place where the world they trust begins to fracture at its edges. The forbidden zone remains nothing more than a rumor to most, yet its presence shapes subtle details of their daily life more than they will ever realize. For a structure as impossibly vast as the Ringworld, stability is not a simple matter of materials and supports. It is an orchestra, a delicate and perpetual balancing act that requires entire systems to work in perfect harmony, second by second, without pause. The inhabitants walking its fields and cities may never think about it, but beneath every blade of grass and every stone road lies a network of energy channels older than their recorded history, humming softly with power, drawn directly from the star at the center. Gravity itself is manufactured here, a continuous, mathematically tuned, centrifugal force created by the ring's gentle rotation. It is not the overwhelming spin of a small station, but a grand, slow turn, spanning millions of miles. A motion so broad and subtle that it feels indistinguishable from natural gravity to those living on the inner surface. Yet gravity alone would not hold such a colossal structure in place. Around the ring's outer edge, invisible to the casual observer, lie the stabilization towers. Tall, needle-like constructs, spaced at intervals so extreme that no inhabitant ever sees more than one in their lifetime. These towers are not physical supports. They are emitters, projecting magnetic fields that counteract tiny variations in rotation. Each field is calibrated to the micronewton, nudging the ring into perfect alignment with the star it orbits. If even one tower were to fail, the imbalance would ripple across the structure like a wave, shifting ecosystems, altering weather patterns, and subtly twisting the engineered harmony that keeps everything seeming so peacefully natural. Deep within the ring's walls, unseen maintenance chambers hum with energy transfers, their corridors bathed in pale light from reactors that never stop breathing. Long tunnels house conduits that pulse with power extracted from the star, photonic streams converted directly into usable energy, regulated by crystalline cores that refract light the way Earth's rivers distribute water. Some cores are so ancient that no modern engineer fully understands their internal composition. They simply function perfectly, as if they were designed not by hands, but by intention. And yet, even with all these marvels, the ring world is not evenly balanced everywhere. The architects built redundancies, overlapping nodes, and intertwined mechanisms to ensure stability. But there remain areas, small at first, where the automated systems seem unable to compensate. Energy fluctuations, invisible to most, appear on diagnostic maps like faint flickering bruises. Engineers whisper of oscillations that should not occur, of magnetic threads that warp subtly and then snap back as if resisting something. They describe it as the ring world tensing, the same way a living body might respond to pressure. The energy distribution system itself is adaptive, constantly rewriting its own pathways to compensate for micro damage caused by age, cosmic dust, or the relentless stress of maintaining a structure so large it defies human comprehension. Along the inner surface, the stabilizers that shape climate, guiding clouds, modulating rainfall, and distributing warmth, respond seamlessly to variations in solar intensity, mimicking the ebb and flow of natural weather cycles. But far from the populated regions, in the more remote zones of the ring, these stabilizers occasionally flicker, briefly, almost imperceptibly, a momentary dimming of light where no clouds exist. A fraction of a second distortion in gravity, detectable only by the most sensitive instruments. A strange metallic ringing in the air that lasts just long enough to make nearby fauna pause and turn their heads. These anomalies are never reported to civilians. They are tucked neatly into encrypted files shared among the highest-ranking engineers, files labeled not as warnings, but as localized calibration defects, a term chosen carefully to avoid invoking fear. Yet the oldest engineers, those who have studied the ring's systems for decades, know better. They recognize the pattern, an echo of the instability predicted by the architect's earliest simulations. A region where no amount of magnetic realignment, gravitational tuning, or energy rerouting has ever managed to create perfect harmony. At first glance, it seems like nothing more than a minor nuisance, a quirk of a megastructure too large to ever be flawless. But the frequency of these fluctuations increases slightly each decade, a subtle trend masked by the ring's sheer size. Younger technicians do not notice. They see only isolated, unconnected events. But the veterans understand. They feel the tremor that exists beneath the calculations, the quiet insistence of a system struggling against something it cannot fully contain. And though they continue to repair and recalibrate, another thought presses at the back of their minds, a thought they never say aloud. If a structure as massive and redundant as the ring world cannot stabilize one region, then perhaps the problem is not mechanical at all. Perhaps the ring world is not simply a machine. Perhaps it is reacting, breathing, resisting, alive. And if that is true, then the most advanced engineering in existence may not be enough to keep the Forbidden Zone silent forever. Long before the Forbidden Zone became a whispered myth among engineers, before research teams vanished, and before the ring world began showing symptoms of strain, it appeared in the archives under a name so subtle that it was almost easy to miss. Sector JX-47, a designation buried deep within maintenance logs from a time when the ring was young and its systems still settling into balance. The first mention comes from a routine reporting cycle, a simple note about minor sensor interference in a region far from populated cities. At first, the architects dismissed it as calibration noise. After all, the magnetic fields needed time to stabilize across millions of miles of structure. But the interference didn't fade. Instead, it grew stronger with each cycle, manifesting as localized data corruption in mapping drones sent to survey the area. These drones would depart with pristine programming and return with scrambled logs, distorted visual feeds, and corrupted internal clocks that showed impossible timestamps, hours repeating, seconds stretching unnaturally, and in rare cases, time running backward for brief intervals. Engineers tried to replicate the errors in controlled environments and failed every time. Machines simply didn't behave that way unless something external, something powerful, was affecting them. Soon after, the first official inspection team was assembled, though it was never described as such in the records. In the logs, it appeared as a magnetic field recalibration task, but the crew roster included only elite diagnostic specialists, not maintenance workers. Their mission was simple on paper: approach the interference site, perform high-resolution scans, and determine whether nearby structures were misaligned. But the logs for that team end abruptly. Their last transmission, recovered only partially, describes a flickering horizon, a sudden pressure in the air, and a visual distortion that bent light unnaturally, as though space itself was slightly folded. Moments later, communication was lost. No emergency beacon, no lifeline, no autopilot return. They simply vanished into the interior curve. For decades, the architects debated what happened, but the conclusion never reached the public. The region was quietly flagged as unstable in internal engineering networks, and protocols were altered to route inspection teams away from it. New drones were sent periodically, each upgraded with stronger shielding and more sophisticated sensors. But the results were always the same: corrupted data, scrambled telemetry, and bizarre atmospheric readings that defied even the architect's most advanced models. One drone returned drifting aimlessly, its navigation core intact, but its memory completely wiped clean. No logs, no footage, not even system errors. Another returned with its structural plating warped, as though exposed to localized gravitational compression. Its edges were slightly curled, its inner circuitry stretched thin like taffy. It should have been physically impossible. Engineers examining the drone reported feeling uneasy around it, as though it emitted a faint vibration. Not a sound, but a sensation deep in the bones. Strangest of all, the drone's outer shell carried traces of a blue particulate substance not found anywhere else on the Ringworld. Microscopic dust that glowed faintly under spectrographic analysis, releasing brief flashes of energy when exposed to magnetic fields. No one could identify its composition. It wasn't metallic, organic, crystalline, or synthetic. It was something else, something old, something foreign to the engineers themselves. As the decades passed, Sector JX-47 acquired other names among the few who dared speak of it. The Quiet Region, the Curve That Echoes, the Blind Patch, and finally, among the most experienced engineers, the Forbidden Zone. Its reputation grew not because of catastrophe, but because of silence. Too many survey missions produced nothing. Too many diagnostics returned void. Too many anomalies defied replication. And so the architects did what civilizations often do when confronted with something they cannot explain. They archived the problem, reclassified the area, and moved on. Documents detailing the zone were sealed in encrypted repositories, accessible only to senior stability officers. Reports that mentioned the region were edited to remove any emotional descriptors. Words like fear, impossible, and alive were replaced with non-repeatable anomaly and temporary aberration. The official stance became one of quiet dismissal. A minor irregularity in a structure of such scale was statistically inevitable. But the engineers knew otherwise. And so the Forbidden Zone slipped into obscurity. Not because it was harmless, but because acknowledging it would mean confronting a possibility that none of them wanted to face. That the Ringworld, a structure built to be flawless, contained a flaw that no amount of brilliance could correct. And somewhere deep within that region, hidden beneath layers of silence and secrecy, The first warning left by the architects still lingers, preserved in their oldest encrypted file. Do not linger near the zone where the ring resists its own creation. To the untrained eye, the Forbidden Zone looks no different from any other stretch of the Ringworld. Gentle plains, soft light, a distant arc curving toward what seems like eternity. But to the engineers who have studied the structure for generations, that region represents the one place where the Ringworld stops behaving like a machine and begins acting like something alive, and not necessarily benevolent. Their fear is not dramatic or emotional. It is quiet, mathematical, clinical. A fear born from equations that refuse to balance, from systems that contradict themselves, from measurements that break the laws that hold the rest of the megastructure together. They have learned that the closer one comes to the zone, the more the numbers begin to unravel. Gravity readings begin drifting, oscillating by minuscule but impossible margins. Variations too small for civilians to feel, yet so significant in engineering terms that they imply localized gravitational distortions. These oscillations appear randomly, lasting only fractions of a second. Yet when graphed over long periods, they reveal a pattern, a heartbeat-like rhythm hidden beneath the data. Engineers have tried to suppress this pattern in official reports, burying it beneath layers of sanitizing language, but the truth echoes through their private research archives. The zone pulses as if responding to some internal pressure. Worse still are the energy anomalies. In most regions of the Ringworld, energy flows along predictable pathways, channeling power from the star into stabilizers, climate systems, and gravity regulators. But near the Forbidden Zone, those pathways warp unpredictably. Currents veer off course, magnetic fields twist, and power lines experience unexplained surges and dips. In the diagnostic logs, these readings form jagged, chaotic graphs that resemble disrupted neural activity. Some engineers call the pattern noise, others call it feedback, but a select few refer to it as resistance, as if the structure itself were pushing back. Instruments meant to read topology, mapping the curvature of the ring's interior, show brief flickers in which the horizon appears to bend incorrectly. In one scan, the curvature seems slightly shallower, in the next, slightly steeper, as though the geometry of the space is subtly shifting moment to moment. And then there is the most unsettling phenomenon. The zone appears to move, not physically, not across the ring, but its boundaries drift, shrinking and expanding in ways that no known system could cause. One year, the anomalous readings cover a circular region 20 kilometers wide. A decade later, the diameter shifts by several kilometers despite no recorded structural changes. Engineers have compared notes across centuries and found that the zone's footprint subtly migrates, not randomly, but in a slow, spiraling pattern, as if orbiting some invisible center buried deep within the structure. But perhaps the most disturbing part, the part that engineers never discuss with the public, is the appearance of shadow currents. These are not shadows cast by objects. They are dark bands of light that slide across the surface without an origin, drifting against the movement of the ring, defying the direction of the shadow panels overhead. They behave like liquid darkness, moving in slow, deliberate arcs that vanish the moment one tries to capture them on recording devices. To the naked eye, they last seconds. To cameras, they appear as static distortion, glitched frames, smeared pixels, corrupted visual fields. Some engineers who have witnessed these currents describe them as cold to look at, as if the mind recoils instinctively, the way one would recoil from staring into a void too deep to comprehend. And then there are the sounds, or rather, the absence of them. In the Forbidden Zone, ambient noise drops sharply. Wind slows to a whisper. Insects fall silent. Even electromagnetic monitors detect a quieting of the environment, a thinning of background radiation that makes the region feel abnormally hollow. Some engineers report that when they stand at the zone's edge, they sense a faint vibration, not felt on the skin but deeper, like a tremor in the bones, an almost subsonic resonance. Others describe a sensation of being watched, though they rationalize it as psychological stress. But the data does not lie. Light curves differently there. Gravity hiccups. Energy patterns ripple like breath. The Ringworld, a structure designed to be flawless, reacts to the forbidden zone with a tension that suggests something more than a simple malfunction. The fear engineers carry is not rooted in stories or superstition. It is rooted in centuries of calculations that show the same conclusion again and again. The instability in that region does not come from damage, age, or wear. It comes from something inherent, something that was always there. Something the architects could not control, only contain. And every year the containment seems to slip just a little bit more. Engineers fear the forbidden zone because in their most private models, they see a possibility they wish they could dismiss. That the anomaly is not a flaw in the Ringworld, but a flaw in the star itself, amplified by the megastructure wrapped around it. Or worse, that the Ringworld has begun to develop responses, reactions, behaviors, not mechanically, not predictably, but biologically. Something in that region does not want to be observed. Something pushes back. Something breathes. The first expedition into what would eventually be known as the Forbidden Zone began not with fear, but with pride. An unwarranted confidence born from centuries of engineering triumphs that had convinced the architects their creation could not contain mysteries beyond their understanding. At the time, the region was still referred to simply as Sector JX-47, a sterile designation hiding the growing unease documented quietly by senior technicians. The decision to send an investigative team came after a series of drone failures that could no longer be dismissed as calibration noise. The architects assembled a group of 6 specialists: gravitational analysts, energy mapping technicians, topological surveyors, and a veteran systems architect who had overseen the construction of thousands of kilometers of the Ringworld's inner infrastructure. This was not a mission announced publicly. It was carried out in secrecy, using an unmarked transport glider that departed from an isolated stabilization tower under the guise of routine magnetic recalibration. Their objective was straightforward: reach the center of the anomalous readings, deploy ground arrays, capture precise measurements, and return within a day. The glider's departure logs show calm skies and stable environmental conditions across the entire approach trajectory. Video feed from the first hours reveals quiet conversation, laughter even, as the team reviewed maps and speculated about potential system misalignments. The Ringworld, after all, had never failed them. To the architects, the idea that the structure could hide something genuinely unknown seemed almost ridiculous. But as the glider crossed into the outer perimeter of the anomaly, the first signs of disturbance appeared. The horizon, normally a smooth upward arc, began warping subtly in the distance, an effect so faint that only the topological expert noticed it. At the same moment, the onboard chronometer desynchronized by half a second, a discrepancy the team initially attributed to magnetic interference. The ocean beneath them shifted color, turning from blue to a pale, glassy silver, as if the water surface were reflecting an entirely different sky. According to the mission logs, wind patterns became unpredictable. Air currents tugged at the glider from inconsistent directions, creating a sense that the atmosphere itself was in motion independent of the ring's rotation. As they descended toward the zone's inner boundary, the sunlight dimmed, not gradually, but abruptly, as though someone were lowering the brightness of the sky. No clouds were present, no shadow panels overhead had moved. The light simply weakened, taking on a muted quality that reminded one team member of deep underwater. They turned on the glider's auxiliary lights. The ground below looked normal at first, plains of tall, gently swaying grass stretching across the interior curvature. But the grass moved strangely, bending in slow, rippling waves that did not match the direction or speed of the wind. Video playback shows the blades swaying as if stirred by something beneath the soil, not above it. As the glider touched down, the sensors began to malfunction. Altitude readings flickered between correct values and impossible ones. Altitudes far below the ring's inner surface, as if the structure had suddenly dipped or hollowed out beneath them. Temperature data fluctuated by entire degrees within seconds. Electromagnetic monitors spiked without pattern. The mission leader insisted on continuing. The anomalies made the investigation even more urgent. They deployed the first ground array, a tripod-like instrument designed to read deep structural vibrations. The moment it powered on, its screen filled with fractals, self-repeating patterns spiraling outward, repeating across dozens of frequencies simultaneously. These patterns matched none of the predicted models for structural stress or harmonic oscillation. Instead, they resembled the exact numerical signatures produced by certain biological systems: heartbeat rhythms, neural firings, oscillations found only in complex living organisms. The discovery rattled the team, though they tried to rationalize it. The lead gravitational analyst began running simulations on the spot, attempting to reconcile the fractals with known mechanical behaviors, but her console repeatedly froze, each time displaying a blank screen filled with a faint blue glow, the same shade found in the mysterious dust recovered later from damaged drones. Their second instrument, an energy field mapper, lasted barely 2 minutes before its sensors overloaded. The device recorded a massive spike in power, far beyond what should exist anywhere on the Ringworld's interior, followed by a total blackout. Its logs ended with a single frame, a distorted image showing a column of light rising from the ground like a frozen bolt of lightning. The column remained perfectly still, as though suspended in time. According to oral accounts recovered later from personal audio diaries, the team began experiencing physical symptoms at this point. Pressure in their ears, a subtle vibration in their teeth, and a sensation described by one as the feeling of standing too close to something enormous and awake. The atmosphere around them grew unnaturally quiet. No insects, no birds, not even wind through the grass. One member reported feeling as though the silence had weight, like a blanket pressing against the skin. Despite mounting unease, they pressed toward the center of the anomaly. They never reached it. Surveillance footage from the glider, recovered only in fragments, shows the team walking toward a shimmering distortion ahead, something like heat haze rising from the ground but bending sideways instead of upward. As they approached, the distortion expanded, its edges rippling like liquid glass. Their bodies begin to blur on the recording, outlines dissolving into thin, vertical streaks. The final intact frame shows the team standing frozen mid-step, faces turned upward as if looking at something immense above them, though no such object appears in the footage. Then the feed collapses into static. The glider remained untouched, its systems intact, its emergency beacon still functional. But the team never returned. When a secondary retrieval drone was sent the next day, it found the landing site. Grass flattened where the glider touched down, but no footprints, no equipment, no bodies. The ground arrays were gone. The air still held the unnatural quiet. The only trace left behind was a faint imprint in the soil shaped not like a boot, but like a perfect spiral. After that mission, the architects ordered all further exploration classified and sealed. The incident was renamed a structural harmonic collapse in public documentation, but those who studied the private logs used different language filled with dread. Because the footage didn't simply show a team disappearing, it showed space itself warping around them, as if the Forbidden Zone were not a place, but an event, one that waits. Among the engineers who have quietly studied the Forbidden Zone for centuries, an unspoken rule governs their discussions. Do not speculate. Do not guess. Do not attach a theory to something you cannot measure, but over time, the anomalies in Sector JX47 became too persistent, too strange, too far beyond the realm of mechanical failure to ignore, and so, hidden in encrypted archives, passed privately between stability directors and structural physicists. A set of theories, classified as non-public analytical models, began to take shape. They were never meant to be acknowledged, much less believed. Yet they persist because every shred of forbidden data seems to support one of them in some unsettling way. The first and most conservative theory is known simply as the impossible defect. It argues that the zone represents a catastrophic structural flaw dating back to the ring's construction, something so deeply embedded that it cannot be repaired without dismantling thousands of kilometers of the structure. According to this theory, the architects discovered the flaw early in the building process, but hid it deliberately, fearing that admitting such an error would jeopardize the entire mega-project. But this theory collapses under scrutiny. A fundamental structural defect would widen predictably over time, yet the forbidden zone behaves erratically, shrinking one century, expanding the next, drifting across the ring in patterns that no mechanical failure could produce. The second theory is far darker and was long dismissed as superstition until modern readings forced some engineers to reconsider it. Known as the entity hypothesis, it suggests that some form of exotic matter, or even a sentient phenomenon, became trapped within the ring during construction, or perhaps even before construction began. Advocates of this theory point to the fractal patterns recorded by ground arrays, patterns identical to those found in neural systems and certain forms of biological resonance. They also note the drone footage, showing vertical distortions that resemble gravitational shearing, as though space itself recoiled. Proponents believe the zone is not malfunctioning, it is reacting like a living organism irritated by intrusion. Official documentation explicitly forbids discussion of this theory, and engineers caught referencing it have reported mandatory reassignment to distant sectors with no further access to sensitive data. Then, there is the third theory, whispered only among the oldest and most respected physicists, the precursor technology model. It proposes that the forbidden zone is not a ring world malfunction at all, but a remnant of a previous technological era, something the architects found, not created. According to this idea, the architects did not build the megastructure alone. They inherited an ancient artifact buried in space, something so far beyond their understanding that they incorporated it into their design rather than attempt to remove it. This theory is supported by the strange, blue particulate dust found on damaged drones, a substance with no known molecular signature and no analog in any of the ring's construction materials. If the dust predates the ring itself, then whatever lies at the center of the zone may be older than the civilization that built the megastructure around it. This model terrifies engineers not because it implies alien technology, but because it implies alien intention. The fourth theory, easily the most controversial, is labeled the stellar core ripple hypothesis, which suggests that the zone is not within the ring at all, but is instead a projection of some instability inside the star it encircles. In this idea, the ring's immense magnetic and gravitational fields amplify certain star-borne anomalies, causing them to manifest physically along the inner surface. Supporters point to the zone's pulsing pattern, which correlates disturbingly well with subtle fluctuations detected in stellar output. Variations too small to be felt elsewhere, but magnified by the megastructure's design. If true, this would mean the forbidden zone is a symptom of a deeper problem, something happening inside the star itself, something that the ring inadvertently reveals, like a cosmic magnifying lens, focusing instability into physical distortion. But the theory the engineers fear the most is also the one they are expressly forbidden to document, the emergence model. It proposes that the Ringworld, after millions of years of operation, has begun to exhibit emergent behavior, a primitive form of system-level awareness created by the unimaginable scale and complexity of its interconnected systems. Under this interpretation, the Forbidden Zone is not a defect, a relic, or a star-born echo. It is a boundary, a membrane, a place where the ring is trying to correct an error it cannot understand. Engineers supporting this theory point out that the ring's energy networks behave like neural pathways, rerouting signals dynamically, learning from disruptions and reinforcing stable patterns. They highlight the gravitational pulsations that resemble biological rhythms, the shadow currents that act like defensive reflexes, and the fact that no mechanical model can fully predict the zone's behavior. According to them, the zone is an interface, where the ring's automated systems encounter something they cannot process, responding with an instinctive form of rejection. None of these theories are allowed in official documentation. Not one appears in the public database. But they circulate quietly, whispered in dim stabilization towers, and pass between engineers who have seen too much to stay silent. And although each theory contradicts the others, they all share one unsettling conclusion. The Forbidden Zone is not an accident. It is not random. It is not passive. Something inside the ring is actively resisting observation, resisting intrusion, resisting understanding. And whatever lies at its core is not waiting to be discovered. It is waiting to be left alone. For nearly 1,000 years after the disappearance of the first expedition team, the Forbidden Zone remained untouched. Its boundaries watched only from afar. Its disturbances monitored quietly through automated sensors calibrated to avoid direct contact. But as centuries passed and technology evolved far beyond what the architects themselves had created, pressure began to grow among the governing authorities to conduct a definitive investigation. A new generation of scientists, bolder and less burdened by the caution of their ancestors, argued that the mysteries of the zone must finally be confronted. And so, under heavy secrecy, a mission known as Survey Initiative Theta 9 was authorized. Unlike the earlier expeditions, which relied on limited drone systems and analog measurement devices, Theta 9 deployed instruments that could read microscopic fluctuations in gravitational fields, detect energy patterns at sub-quantum levels, and measure temporal irregularities down to fractions of a nanosecond. The mission was spearheaded by a team of 13 experts, engineers, temporal physicists, neural signal analysts, and a single historian whose role was to interpret any anomalies that might relate to ancient construction records. They arrived at the zone's perimeter using a next-generation atmospheric glider equipped with redundancy systems so advanced that failure was mathematically nearly impossible. And yet within minutes of crossing the boundary, those same systems began reporting inconsistencies that no one could explain. The first anomaly appeared as a soft delay, a subtle lag in the glider's navigational feedback. Instead of receiving real-time positional updates, the system began delivering data with a 0.001 second latency, imperceptible to human senses, but horrifying to physicists. Communication lines, designed with triple-shielded quantum relays, began jittering. Instead of transmitting clean telemetry, they returned packets of information out of order, as though past and present signals had been shuffled in transit. The glider's onboard chronometer, synced with the ring's master clock, began drifting by milliseconds, then microseconds, then entire seconds. The zone was interfering with time itself. The team deployed 3 reconnaissance drones, each programmed to maintain constant communication with the glider. The drones descended into the zone like silent sentinels. All 3 immediately experienced sensor disruption, but in different ways. Drone A reported gravitational density oscillating by ratios that violated known physics. Drone B recorded brief flashes of inverted color in its visual feed, as if its camera were capturing wavelengths that had no source. Drone C, equipped with deep scan topological mapping, produced the most disturbing output, a series of holographic models showing the terrain rippling like fabric in a wind that did not exist. And then came the noise. Every instrument simultaneously picked up a low-frequency vibration, too low for humans to hear, but detectable in the bones. The team reported feeling it as a pressure behind the eyes, a quiet thrum in the skull that seemed to pulse in sync with the zone's gravitational patterns. The historian compared the rhythm to seismic signatures recorded in ancient construction logs, but those logs described events associated with living systems, not mechanical ones. Next came the visual distortion. As the drones moved closer to the anomaly's core, their feeds began to show an impossible phenomenon: light curving sideways, not downward, not upward, sideways, as if gravity were bending photons along horizontal lines. Then, without warning, Drone B's feed erupted into static. Drone A transmitted a brief encrypted burst before going silent. Drone C began spinning uncontrollably, its telemetry showing rotational forces far beyond its physical limits. In a final eerie moment, Drone C transmitted an image, a single still frame, before imploding. The image showed a vortex of light suspended several meters above the ground. The vortex was not spinning, not swirling. It was perfectly still, like a wound cut into space, glowing with a faint blue luminescence identical to the particulate dust found centuries earlier. The surface of the vortex seemed to ripple inward, as though the light were collapsing toward an unseen point but never reaching it. Every contour of the vortex was sharp, precise, unnervingly clean, as if it were not a dynamic structure, but a frozen moment in time, an event locked in stasis. As the team attempted to analyze the frame, their equipment began to malfunction. Data logs shifted, backup systems rebooted autonomously. The historian fainted, reporting afterward that the vortex had triggered a memory she did not possess, an impossible image of the architects standing before a similar glow, fear etched across their faces. The team tried to retreat, but the glider's propulsion systems staggered. The air around them thickened. For 7 full minutes, they remained immobilized inside the zone's boundary, trapped in a pocket of slowed temporal flow that made every movement feel syrup-like. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the anomaly released them. The glider lurched forward, systems rebooted, time synchronized. They escaped, but something followed them back. Days after their return, the team reported experiencing identical auditory hallucinations, faint whispers echoing in the quiet moments before sleep. Instruments in their quarters flickered. Shadows bent slightly in directions inconsistent with external light sources. 2 members withdrew from the official report, citing psychological distress. Another disappeared entirely, leaving behind only an encrypted message containing a single phrase: "It is not a place, it is a threshold." When Theta 9's findings were presented to the Governing Council, the reaction was swift. All data was classified, all surviving logs were sealed. The public explanation claimed the mission was cancelled due to catastrophic sensor interference. But inside the engineering hierarchy, a new order was issued, one that has never been rescinded: no further expeditions. The Forbidden Zone is to be left in complete isolation. And the most chilling part, the vortex has not moved since the day it was first seen. It remains there, suspended in perfect stillness, as if waiting for someone or something to cross. Even though the Forbidden Zone lies far beyond the reach of ordinary citizens, beyond their cities, their farms, their oceans and sky bridges, it reaches them all the same. Its influence spreads quietly, subtly, woven into the fabric of the Ringworld like a distant heartbeat felt through the floor of a giant machine. Most inhabitants would never know they are being affected, and that ignorance is by design. But across the centuries, patterns have emerged, patterns that engineers and historians have studied in secret, patterns that point back to the same place on the endless inner curve. Sector JX-47, the first signs appeared in the environment. In regions thousands of kilometers away, migratory animals began altering their seasonal routes, avoiding paths that brought them even remotely closer to the zone's drifting footprint. Herds that once moved in perfect rhythmic cycles suddenly hesitated, circling back on themselves as if repelled by an invisible barrier. Birds flew higher, choosing routes that stretched far longer than instinct should dictate. Aquatic species displayed agitation during certain phases of the day-night cycle, as though responding to a stimulus humans could not perceive. Ecologists looked for explanations in weather, magnetic fields, and natural cycles. They found none. Then came the atmospheric anomalies. Residents in distant cities began reporting odd changes in the air, breezes that shifted temperature without warning, moments when the wind stopped entirely as if caught in a breath, pockets of stillness where sound seemed to dampen, muffled as though wrapped in thick fabric. Measurements taken using high-altitude sensors revealed that microfluctuations in atmospheric pressure were propagating outward from the forbidden zone like delicate vibrations, usually too subtle to detect, but unmistakable on the most sensitive instruments. These fluctuations were rhythmic, repeating every few hours, always matching the time signatures of the gravitational pulses observed near the zone itself. Engineers compared the readings and found the correlation chillingly precise. The zone had a pulse, and the Ringworld was carrying it like a drumhead, transmitting vibration across its entire surface. But even more disturbing were the temporal disturbances. In quiet, rural towns, people began recalling days that felt somehow off, as if time had slipped or repeated. Farmers spoke of mornings when the light seemed identical to the day before, not similar but exactly the same, down to the cloud patterns lingering in the engineered sky. Children reported dreams that matched perfectly with events that had not yet happened. In one settlement, located more than 11,000 kilometers from the Forbidden Zone, an entire group of workers experienced a shared moment of déjà vu lasting nearly 30 seconds. All of them reported the same sensation, that the world had looped, stuttering like a glitch in a simulation. Officials attributed the incident to mass suggestion, but internal logs show that at the same moment, seismic monitors registered a micro-oscillation from the zone's center, an oscillation that propagated through the ring's structure like a ripple of tension. Electrical systems across the Ringworld also began to show the zone's influence. Lights flickered during periods of total atmospheric stability. Power grids experienced ghost surges, brief, intense bursts of energy with no identifiable source. Entire sections of urban infrastructure would dim for a fraction of a second, not enough to cause alarm, but enough to unsettle maintenance crews who understood that such fluctuations should be impossible in a system designed to withstand stellar-scale stress without a single interruption. One power stabilization officer reported seeing his console flash an error code that did not exist in any diagnostics manual. The code appeared for only a second and then vanished, replaced by a looping symbol, a spiral identical to the imprint found in the soil after the first expedition disappeared. When he reported the incident, he was reassigned within 24 hours. Citizens also began telling stories that sounded like folklore, yet matched eerily with engineering data. Travelers described dark bands crossing the sky, like elongated shadows with no object above to cast them. Residents of a coastal city reported seeing their reflections in the water lag by a fraction of a second, as if the surface was struggling to keep up with real time. One settlement filed repeated complaints about a swaying horizon, describing moments when the distant curve of the Ringworld seemed to stretch or compress slightly before snapping back into place. And then there were the whispering phenomena. In several regions, individuals reported hearing faint murmurs at night, soft, indecipherable sound patterns that vanished the moment one tried to focus on them. Some said the whispers came from the walls of their homes. Others insisted they came from the ground itself. Audio recordings captured nothing, but psychological evaluations confirmed a curious consistency. The whispers always occurred within 36 hours of significant gravitational pulsations in the Forbidden Zone. In the eyes of the public, all these incidents were disconnected oddities. Coincidence, imagination, weather, power fluctuations, sleep deprivation. But the engineers knew better. They linked the patterns, traced the anomalies, mapped the ripples across the ring's interior. And every line, every pulse, every echo led back to the same place, the quiet, unmoving heart of the Forbidden Zone. The conclusion they reached was one they would never admit publicly. The Forbidden Zone is not contained. It radiates, it influences, it reaches. Even those who have never heard its name, who live in peaceful cities on the far edges of the Ringworld, are touched by its presence in subtle, invisible ways. The zone is not simply a location, it is a phenomenon. And phenomena, by their nature, spread. Among all the theories whispered behind sealed doors and encrypted reports, there is one that engineers refuse to write down, not because it lacks evidence, but because acknowledging it would challenge the very purpose of the Ringworld's existence. This most feared hypothesis is known unofficially as the inward collapse model, though those who have confronted its implications call it by a name more chilling, the living error. According to this theory, the Forbidden Zone is not simply a malfunction, a structural anomaly, or a relic of ancient technology. It is the beginning of a self-perpetuating failure, one that grows not outward, as traditional engineering logic would dictate, but inward, eating its way toward the core of the ring's reality. The earliest indication of this came from a series of harmonic analyses conducted by senior gravitational physicists. When they plotted the fluctuations from the zone's perimeter over time, they discovered something terrifying. The pattern did not expand or contract in a circular shape like a ripple on water. Instead, it folded inward, curling onto itself in spiraling loops that resembled biological growth curves typical of parasitic organisms, not mechanical structures. The engineers tried to model this behavior as a mechanical stress pattern, but every simulation failed. Reinforcement calculations broke down. Energy distribution models collapsed into errors. Temperature differentials refused to settle into predictable patterns. The zone behaved as if the Ringworld were trying to repair something and failing miserably. Worse, the error did not dissipate with distance. Instead, its influence tunneled inward through the ring's layers, penetrating structural walls, energy conduits, even gravitational stabilizers. The anomaly was not spreading across the surface. It was penetrating deeper, burrowing through the very foundation of the Ringworld, like a worm eating through a tree. And then came the revelation that none of them wanted. The anomaly's behavior was recursive. Every time the stabilization systems attempted to correct the zone's distortions, the distortions adapted. The magnetic fields shifted subtly before each recalibration cycle, altering their patterns as though anticipating the engineer's next move. Energy rerouting attempts failed in new ways each time. Gravity regulators in remote towers detected slight phase shifts timed perfectly with stabilization pulses, as if the anomaly were watching and responding. It was learning. To some of the physicists, this was the most horrifying part. Not the instability itself, not the distortion of space-time, not even the mysterious blue particulate dust, but the unmistakable sense that the zone was engaged in a feedback loop with the Ringworld's automated systems. Not by accident, but by interaction, in secret summits held deep within the ring's central monitoring complex, senior engineers gathered to confront the implications. The earliest construction logs, those left by the architects themselves, contained references to an unstable node, a region of the ring where spatial harmonics could not be stabilized due to interference from an unknown source. Those logs warned that if the anomaly were ever triggered, it would push inward against the skeleton of the ring until the structure's core design principles failed. analysts who revisited those ancient documents concluded that the architects had not been hiding a mistake. They had been hiding a warning. According to the inward collapse model, the forbidden zone is not an external anomaly invading the ring. It is something the ring itself is failing to contain. The megastructure's energy conduits, stabilizers, magnetic regulators, and gravitational systems were all designed to distribute stress outward. But in the forbidden zone, the stress folds inward with perfect efficiency, creating a feedback loop that amplifies itself with every attempt at correction. This means the most terrifying possibility of all. The forbidden zone may be the structural equivalent of a singularity, a region where the physical laws inside the ring collapse into a new state, one that the ring world's systems are not equipped to understand or control. Some physicists have compared it to a neural system experiencing a seizure, with the forbidden zone acting as the epicenter of a runaway electrical loop. Others believe the anomaly represents a rupture in the ring's interaction with the star's energy field. A rupture that grows not because it spreads, but because the ring continually feeds it through attempts to neutralize it. But the darkest interpretation, the one that even the most seasoned engineers refuse to speak aloud, is this. The ring world may be alive enough to recognize the anomaly as a threat, but not alive enough to stop it. In this view, the ring is fighting back, desperately, instinctively, but losing. The engineers have mapped the collapse model hundreds of times, and each simulation points to the same final outcome. The forbidden zone will not explode, expand outward, or shatter the ring. It will collapse inward, drawing more and more of the ring into itself until the megastructure folds like a colossal sheet of metal pulled into a star. And if that happens, the entire ring world, millions of miles of land, oceans, skies, ecosystems, civilization, will unravel not over centuries or millennia, but in a single cascading moment of gravitational failure. The living error is not feared because it predicts destruction. It is feared because it predicts inevitability. And if the forbidden zone continues to deepen, continues to pulse, continues to interact with the ring's systems, then the ring world is not simply at risk. It is already dying. Stepping into the forbidden zone is not like crossing a border or entering a new landscape. It is like slipping into a different set of physical rules, a place where the ring world's perfect harmony breaks apart in subtle, disquieting ways that accumulate with every breath. The approach begins quietly. Grasslands stretching along the inner curve begin to look wrong, though it is hard at first to say why. The colors seem slightly desaturated, as if viewed through a thin film of fog or through glass that has not been cleaned in centuries. The light above, normally warm, soft, and evenly distributed, takes on a pale bluish tint, though the shadow panels overhead remain in their standard positions. The air feels thicker, as if infused with microscopic particles that slow down motion just enough to unsettle the subconscious. Engineers describe the first sensation as walking underwater without the wetness, a pressure against the chest and skull that builds by degrees. The moment a visitor steps across the invisible threshold, the ambient sound of the ring world fades, not suddenly, not completely, but in a gradual muting that feels disturbingly intentional. The wind quiets, insects vanish. The distant hum of stabilizer towers erases itself. Even footsteps sound muffled, as though the ground absorbs the vibrations before they can reflect back into the air. The silence is not peaceful, it is predatory. With every step deeper into the zone, gravity begins to misbehave. It does not vanish or fluctuate violently. Instead, it stutters like a flickering candle. For a fraction of a second, a visitor may feel lighter, then heavier, then perfectly normal again. The fluctuations are tiny, too small for civilians to detect consciously, but engineers sense them instantly, their instruments lighting up with warnings as micro-gravitational pulses sweep through the region like waves of pressure. The horizon ahead begins bending in strange ways, not dramatically, not obviously, but subtly, just enough that the curvature feels inconsistent with the rest of the ringworld. Trees in the distance seem to lean inward toward an unseen focal point, though a closer look reveals that their trunks are perfectly straight. The distortion lies not in the trees themselves, but in the space between them, as though the air has pockets of compressed geometry. Light behaves unpredictably here. Sunbeams, instead of traveling in clean, straight lines, appear to shimmer sideways, bending subtly against the direction of the artificial sun. Shadows move at inconsistent speeds, lagging behind their objects or drifting ahead by a fraction of a second. One explorer once reported watching his own shadow detach from his feet for an instant, stretching forward like a curious animal before snapping back into place. The ground, too, feels alive. Engineers have described moments in which the soil seems to breathe, rising and falling almost imperceptibly as though responding to the gravitational pulses beneath it. In some areas, the ground vibrates with a rhythmic hum, a low-frequency resonance that cannot be heard but can be felt deep in the bones. The vibration follows a pattern identical to the pulsations recorded by Theta 9 near the vortex. The deeper one travels, the more this resonance grows, becoming a constant presence that makes even calm minds uneasy. And then the visual distortions intensify. At certain angles, the landscape ripples, warping like the surface of a lake, disturbed by a single falling drop. A tree may appear elongated one moment and perfectly normal the next. The grass underfoot may seem to sway even in dead stillness. The air appears to thicken around certain points, forming shimmering pockets of refracted light that quiver like heat mirages, even though temperature remains constant. For those who venture even further, the zone begins to show its most unsettling phenomenon: temporal slipstreams. Visitors may take a step and momentarily feel as if the world has skipped forward, like a missing frame in a film reel. Conversations echo a split second before they are spoken. Breathing feels synchronized with a rhythm that is not one's own. More terrifying still are the auditory distortions. Not whispers, but soft, pulsing tones that resemble distant machinery or a living heartbeat. These tones are not external, they are internal, pressed into the skull like a vibrating memory. No device has ever successfully recorded them. The deeper the descent, the more the light shifts. The sky dims into a muted silver. Colors drain from the world. The once gentle curves of the ringworld appear to sag, as though the structure is bending toward a point just out of sight. And in that moment, every visitor knows they have crossed into a space the ringworld itself does not want them to enter. But the most disturbing change of all is psychological. Not hallucination, not fear, but a profound sense of being observed. Not by something with eyes or a face, but by the zone itself. The air feels expectant, as if the structure holds its breath, watching to see what the intruders will do next. In Theta 9's audio logs, one researcher whispered near tears, "It's not empty, it's aware." And yet, deeper still lies the true heart of the anomaly, the core that engineers have spent millennia avoiding. But to reach it, one must first cross the threshold where geometry breaks, where gravity flickers, where time hesitates, and where the ringworld's own systems begin to recoil as though they are trying to push intruders away. In this region, every instinct tells the visitor to stop. The spine tightens, the stomach sinks. And one overwhelming truth rises with undeniable clarity. Whatever lies ahead is not meant to be witnessed. But the path continues. The distortions intensify, and the core, the thing that bends the ringworld's laws, waits. At the deepest point of the forbidden zone, where light bends until it resembles a trembling veil, and the ringworld's geometry folds into itself like a wounded creature, lies the phenomenon that has haunted engineers, scientists, and archivists for countless generations: the core. It reveals itself gradually, not as a sudden object, but as a progressive distortion in reality, a thickening of the air and a warping of perception that announces its presence long before the eye can fully understand it. The ground changes first. The soil becomes smooth, almost polished, with patterns etched into its surface that resemble both natural fractals and engineered circuitry, as if the land itself is trying to communicate. These patterns pulse faintly with blue luminescence, glowing in sync with the gravitational heartbeat detected across the zone. With every step closer, the air grows colder, not the cold of temperature, but the cold of absence, like entering a place where energy itself has been siphoned away. The silence deepens until it feels like a pressure against the skull, so absolute that even one's own breathing sounds foreign and intrusive. And then, abruptly, the landscape opens, revealing a vast circular cavity carved into the Ringworld's interior surface. It is not a crater. Craters imply impact, violence, loudness. This cavity is impossibly smooth, as though the structure itself collapsed inward without tearing, folding silently into a perfect depression. At the center of the cavity floats the core, a towering column of light, utterly motionless, suspended about a meter above the ground. It glows with a color that defies ordinary sight. Not just blue, not just white, but something between luminescence and memory. A hue that seems to exist outside the electromagnetic spectrum. Engineers describe it as the coldest color ever seen. A light that illuminates without warmth, as though the star at the center of the Ringworld were being filtered through some alien prism. The column is narrow, no wider than a doorway, but extends upward indefinitely, disappearing into a thin mist that swirls around it. And it is frozen. Frozen not like ice, but like time halted in the middle of motion. Strands of light curve toward the column, but never touch it. Suspended in mid-air like electric filaments paused in a single frame of animation. Some appear twisted, others spiraling, others branching like neurons firing in a cosmic brain. None of them move, not even by a micron. They are locked in place, as if the core has seized time itself and pinned it to a single unending moment. The land around the core shows impossible physical effects. Small rocks hover centimeters above the ground, rotating slowly as though caught in invisible orbits. Blades of grass stretch upward unnaturally long, frozen mid-bend, as though a breeze died in the middle of its own motion. Water droplets, condensation from the cold air, hang suspended in clusters, shimmering like tiny glass beads. And yet, paradoxically, none of it feels hostile. It feels observant. The closer one steps to the core, the more the human mind struggles to comprehend it. The column emits no heat, no sound, no detectable radiation, yet every instrument ever pointed at it registers overwhelming signal saturation, as if the core were broadcasting every frequency at once. Attempts to measure it always fail. Data collapses into static, sensors overload, time-stamped records corrupt themselves. Even the most advanced gravitational readers produce contradictory results, some showing infinite mass, others zero, others negative curvature that suggests the core is pulling space inside out. But most disturbing of all is that the core does not seem entirely static. Though frozen in appearance, observers report a faint sense of movement, not external, but internal, like the shifting of thought or the flicker of consciousness. Engineers who approach too closely describe the sensation of being watched, not in a metaphorical sense, but with a clarity that invades the mind. Some report a surge of memories, others a sudden intrusion of foreign thoughts, and a few describe a profound feeling that the core is trying to understand them. Theta 9's historian wrote in her private log shortly before her disappearance, "It observes patterns, it mirrors them, it remembers them. It is not a structure, it is an eye." And at the very base of the core, embedded in the ground, lies a fissure, a long, narrow crack stretching outward like an ancient scar. The crack is impossibly precise, as though carved by a scalpel at the molecular level. And what lies within that crack is even more unsettling. a perfectly still layer of blue particulate dust, glowing faintly with the same impossible color as the core. It is identical to the dust found on the damaged drones centuries earlier, the dust that could not be classified by any known molecular or elemental model. This dust appears to pulse at the exact same rhythm as the core, like shared breath. Some engineers speculate that the dust is not debris, but residue from an interaction between the core and the Ringworld's material structure. Others believe it is a byproduct of spatial compression, the physical echo of dimensional strain. And a few, the ones who never speak publicly, believe it is alive. Near the fissure, time behaves erratically. Seconds stretch and compress without warning. Heartbeats fall out of sync with breathing. Voices echo half a second before being spoken. Instruments measure periods of stillness so absolute that they defy the definition of time itself. The ground here does not simply distort space, it distorts causality, and yet the core remains perfectly still, as if waiting, as if listening, as if holding the entire Ringworld in a delicate balance that could collapse with the slightest disturbance. The most terrifying realization comes only when standing directly before it. The core is not expanding outward, it is pulling inward. All distortions, all anomalies, all gravitational pulses fold toward it, like the universe itself is being funneled into a pinhole of frozen light. And if that light were ever to flicker, if the core were ever to resume motion, the Ringworld would not simply destabilize, it would implode, because the core is not just the heart of the anomaly, it is the anchor, the lock, the thing holding something far worse from breaking free. For as long as the Ringworld has existed, its people have lived under the illusion of stability, of endless land, infinite horizons, and a sky that never fails. To them, the megastructure is a miracle, a sanctuary carved out of cosmic emptiness, a world so perfectly engineered that it feels eternal. But deep within the administrative core, far from the public's eyes and ears, lies a truth that has tormented generations of leaders, engineers, and archivists. The Ringworld's perfection is a facade, and at its center, an anomaly is slowly writing its own fate into the structure's bones. The dilemma arises in every closed-door meeting and every encrypted exchange between high-ranking officials. Should the truth be revealed or concealed? And neither answer is simple. To reveal the truth, to openly admit that a living world of millions, stretched across millions of miles of engineered land, sits atop a floor capable of collapsing reality itself, would trigger panic on a scale unimaginable. Civilians may be brave, but civilizations are fragile, and the mere hint that the ground beneath them is unstable would unravel the social fabric in days. Economies would crash, cities would flood with desperate migrations away from the imaginary threat. Entire religions would form overnight around the anomaly, some desperate to appease it, others eager to destroy it, all adding more instability to a system already on the edge. The psychological toll alone would be catastrophic. Studies conducted in secret have shown that even trained scientists experience existential dread when confronted with the core's footage. The idea that light can freeze in time, that matter can fold inward, that the horizon can ripple as if breathing. These concepts fracture the human mind's instinctive belief in stability. If the truth were public, millions might lose their sense of identity, meaning, or purpose. For this reason, many leaders argue that silence is mercy, and that ignorance, in this one case, is not weakness, but protection. Yet concealment carries its own moral burden. Engineers who know the truth struggle beneath its weight, forced to maintain systems built atop a phenomenon they cannot explain. Many feel complicit in a lie that threatens the very people they aim to protect. They patch cracks in the Ringworld systems while knowing those cracks converge toward the core. They reassure their teams while carrying private knowledge that the anomaly is deepening. They calculate probabilities while ignoring the most terrifying possibility, that the anomaly may eventually become impossible to conceal. Worse, some members of the governing council fear that hiding the truth may slow humanity's ability to respond. Without public awareness, there is no collective push for innovation, no urgency for solutions, no philosophical reckoning with mortality on a megastructure scale. By keeping the secret contained within a tiny elite, they risk dooming the Ringworld's inhabitants to an unprepared end should the anomaly escalate. In private conversations, late at night behind locked doors, leaders whisper, "Are we protecting them or robbing them of the chance to fight for their future?" And there is another, more existential fear, one that few are willing to speak aloud. What if the core is not an enemy, but a message? What if its behavior is not a symptom of collapse, but a communication, an attempt at interaction, stabilization, or even warning? By concealing its existence, the governing authorities may be silencing the single most important signal the Ringworld has ever received. The archivists argue that every anomaly is a form of information. Every ripple, every distortion, every pulse contains meaning. If the core is alive, or if it houses some fragment of an intelligence older than the Ringworld, then ignoring it out of fear may be humanity's greatest mistake. But the counter-argument is equally disturbing. If the core is alive, then revealing its existence may draw attention to it, intensifying its behavior or destabilizing the balance between human activity and the anomaly. For centuries, the debate has looped endlessly. Mathematicians present collapse models. Sociologists model panic curves. Ethics scholars argue that withholding truth on this scale violates the fundamental principle of free will. But no one, not even the bravest among them, has been willing to propose full disclosure. The weight of that decision is too immense. And so the Ringworld continues its quiet lie. Citizens walk beneath engineered skies, unaware of the frozen column of light buried thousands of kilometers away, unaware that the ground beneath their feet occasionally trembles with a pulse not of tectonics, but of space itself straining. The engineers continue their silent vigil. The archivists guard forbidden data. The leaders rehearse speeches they pray they never have to deliver. And the core continues to pulse, observing, waiting, growing ever so slightly more active with each passing century. In the grand moral equation, no one knows which is worse: releasing a truth that might shatter an entire civilization, or hiding a truth that might one day consume it. As one council member once wrote in a private log, later deleted from the official archive, "To reveal the truth would break their minds. To hide it may break their world." Standing at the edge of the forbidden zone, knowing what lies buried within its frozen vortex of light, within the spiraling fracture lines carved into the megastructure's bones, the question that has haunted generations becomes unavoidable. What happens next? The Ringworld, for all its magnificence, was never meant to last forever. Even the architects acknowledged that entropy, cosmic radiation, and structural fatigue would eventually demand intervention. But none of their calculations predicted this, an anomaly that grows inward rather than outward, that interacts rather than collapses, that pulses like something alive. And as the core deepens its influence, the governing council faces an impossible series of futures, each more uncertain than the last. The most conservative proposal is containment, a plan that has quietly existed for hundreds of years. Its goal is simple: isolate the forbidden zone entirely, surround it with magnetic barriers, divert energy flows away from it, reinforce the structure in surrounding sectors with layers of redundant supports. In theory, containment could delay the anomaly's spread for centuries, maybe even millennia, buying time through sheer engineering persistence. But the inward collapse model complicates this hope. If the anomaly grows inward, containment at the surface level is meaningless. Reinforcing the outer layers of a structure whose floor deepens toward its core is like patching cracks on a wall while the foundation sinks. Containment may slow the inevitable, but it will not stop it. The second proposal is repair, the most ambitious and perhaps naive option. It imagines deploying advanced nanotechnology, gravitational reweavers, or even controlled bursts of star energy to neutralize the distortions at their source. But repairs require understanding, and the Forbidden Zone defies comprehension. How do you fix something that breaks the laws that define repair? How do you mend a structure that refuses to behave like matter? Engineers who have studied the core up close insist that the anomaly does not behave like damage. It behaves like intention. Attempting to repair it may provoke it, strengthen it, or destabilize the entire region. The archivists fear that any attempt at interference might trigger the very collapse humanity hopes to avoid. The third proposal is abandonment, the darkest and least discussed option. In this future, the Ringworld's inhabitants would evacuate sector by sector, fleeing along the endless curve of the megastructure until they reach regions far enough away that the anomaly's influence becomes negligible. Cities would be dismantled, infrastructure abandoned, the Great Plains would fall silent. Eventually, the Ringworld could be left to collapse on its own, without taking billions of lives with it. But this plan is fraught with logistical nightmares. The Ringworld's size is incomprehensible. Evacuation could take millennia. Entire cultures would dissolve, and the psychological toll of abandoning their world, the only world they have ever known, would ignite panic on a scale far beyond anything imaginable. Worse still, abandonment assumes the anomaly will remain localized. But if the core is tied to the Ringworld's fundamental structure or to the star itself, then distance offers no safety. The fourth proposal is the most radical: transformation. Some scientists argue that instead of resisting the anomaly, humanity should attempt to integrate with it, to understand it, communicate with it, perhaps even harness it. If the core represents an ancient technology or a natural cosmic phenomenon, then maybe it holds the key to a new evolutionary path. Maybe the light is not a threat, but an opportunity. But this proposal terrifies nearly everyone who hears it. The core is not passive. It engages, it reacts, it remembers. If it is alive, or if it contains something alive, then attempting to merge with it could lead to consequences far beyond human comprehension. Transformation is the path of both salvation and oblivion, and no one can predict which side would win. Then there is the fifth possibility, one no one speaks aloud, yet everyone feels in the quiet moments between crises. Perhaps the future is already decided. What if the anomaly is not growing, but waking? What if the Ringworld's presence around the star has triggered something ancient, something dormant? What if the architects framed the megastructure not around a cosmic opportunity, but around a cosmic prison? Theta 9's recordings show the core in a state of perfect stillness, as though time itself were holding it in place. If that stillness breaks, if the vortex ever begins to rotate or throb or move, the Ringworld may not have centuries. It may have minutes. And yet, amid these terrifying futures, there are glimmers of hope. A new generation of researchers believes the anomaly's patterns, despite their fearsome appearance, are not chaotic, but structured. They see fractals, harmonics, mathematical elegance. They argue that the core is not a destructive force, but a message, a cosmic instruction written in the only language the universe speaks, physics. If this is true, then the future may not be collapse. It may be transformation, an evolution into something new, something greater, something unimaginable. But to pursue this future, humanity would need to confront the truth openly. They would need to abolish centuries of secrecy. They would need to walk toward the core instead of running from it. And they would need to trust that the anomaly, despite its terrifying nature, holds meaning. The Ringworld stands today on the edge of all these futures at once: contain, repair, abandon, transform. Accept, fear, hope. The path forward is uncertain, unstable, and deeply human, and as the gravitational pulses continue their silent rhythm, echoing through millions of miles of engineered land, one reality becomes unmistakable. The Ringworld's future is no longer defined by its creators. It is defined by whatever lies waiting at its center, whether that force is death, rebirth, collapse, or awakening remains unknown. In the end, when all the theories have been explored, when every forbidden file has been studied in dimly lit archives, when the last surviving engineers dare to whisper what they truly fear, the Forbidden Zone remains exactly what it has always been. A silent question at the heart of an impossible world. The Ringworld stretches endlessly around its star, a ribbon of civilization suspended in a cosmic void, a structure so vast and so beautiful that it defies the ordinary scale of human existence. People laugh, love, work, sleep, and dream on its endless plains, unaware that beneath the comfort of their routines, beneath the engineered weather and the perfect curvature of their horizon, a secret pulses through the very bones of their reality. The core, frozen in light and time, stands as a reminder that even the most flawless creations can harbor mysteries deeper than their foundations. It does not move, it does not speak, it does not change, yet its presence shapes the entire Ringworld like an invisible tide, influencing weather patterns, warping light, tugging at gravity, bending time in single-frame hesitations that ripple outwards for thousands of kilometers. For all our calculations and models, for all our maps and simulations, humanity has never truly understood the core. We can describe its shape, catalogue its distortions, measure its pulses, but we cannot grasp its purpose. Is it a wound, a relic, a beacon, a living intelligence trapped within machinery far beyond our own? Or is it something far stranger, something that lies outside the boundary of our understanding, as the ocean lies outside the comprehension of a single drop of water? The archivists argue that the core is ancient, older than the Ringworld, older perhaps than the architects themselves. The physicists argue that it is a natural anomaly, magnified by the structure that surrounds it. The engineers argue that it is a flaw, a defect, a threat. The prophets, the few who have glimpsed it and survived, argue that it is a message. But none of these interpretations matter because the core offers no answers. It simply exists, suspended in an unwavering moment, watching a world that cannot afford to look back. And so the Ringworld continues. Its oceans rise and fall with artificial tides. Its shadow panels glide across the sky, dimming the star in a perfect imitation of night. Its cities glow in the darkness, oblivious to the silent pulse underfoot. Children grow up without ever knowing the truth. Workers tend to crops suspended along an inner curvature that stretches into infinity. Travelers move across plains so vast they never reach the same horizon twice. Life goes on. Meanwhile, deep within the Forbidden Zone, the core continues to hold. It holds the fractures in place. It holds time in suspension. It holds the Ringworld's fate like a delicate glass sphere balanced on the edge of an unseen hand. We do not know if it is protecting us or waiting to collapse us. We do not know if it is asleep or awake. We do not know if it is a flaw or a design. But perhaps the most humbling truth is this: no world, no matter how vast or perfect, is ever truly stable. Beneath every structure lies a hidden tension. Beneath every civilization lies an unanswered question. Beneath every creation lies the possibility of mystery far deeper than its foundations. And the Forbidden Zone is that mystery, wrapped in light that refuses to move, breathing in pulses that echo across continents, whispering truths that no one is ready to hear. Engineers stand before it and feel awe. Physicists stand before it and feel fear. Historians stand before it and feel destiny. But when all is said and done, when the gravitational pulses fade into the distance and the silence presses once more against the mind, the core asks a single, wordless question, a question that lingers like a chill beneath the skin, unresolved, unanswered, undeniable. What if the zone is not an error, but a signal? As that question hangs in the air, the ring world rotates quietly around its star, carrying billions of lives across an endless arc of engineered land, unaware that at its center, frozen in eternal stillness, something waits, something ancient, something patient, something that may one day decide to break the silence. Until that day comes, the mystery remains, vast, cosmic and humbling. And the ring world, for all its magnificence, becomes a reminder of the universe's oldest lesson. Some secrets are not discovered. They are revealed when they choose to be.